Good evening and welcome to this Longmeadow Select Board meeting for January 22nd, 2019. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Getting the feeling it's like throwback night with 3 select board members, but we actually have some illnesses and other conflicts. So, but we do have a quorum, and we will be going through our agenda tonight, which includes some mostly discussions on issues such as a potential shared health program, the community preservation discussion, and some follow-up from our town meeting. So we don't anticipate this to be a lengthy select board meeting, but we will go through the agenda. I don't know, Stephen, if you have any announcements. I pulled one that I'd just like to say, which is this Longmeadow Police Department which announced that Lieutenant Robert Stocks, graduated from the FBI National Academy on December 14th, and I'd like to congratulate Lieutenant Stocks. It was a great achievement, a lot of work on his part, and really represents the work of the Longmeadow Police Department.
I would just add, with the weather, the inclement weather we've just had, and the projection for more tomorrow evening into Thursday, rain, significant amount of rain, just to remind people to check storm drains on their streets and near their properties to make sure they're clear. There's obviously, the ground is not going to absorb a lot of the water, so the potential for street flooding could be there. So just check your storm drains and also make sure the fire hydrants are clear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
And trash pickup has been delayed one day this week. The Monday route was put off because of the weather and the cold. But so if your normal day is off one.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other announcements? Ask for if there are any resident comments. We have some people here. If you come forward, please, and just state your name and address, and just please. The microphone's for TVs, not so much here, but you do need to speak into the microphone. Thank you.
It's Gary Levine, 207 William Street. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to add my voice concerning the placement of a gas metering station by the Tennessee Gas Company at the Longmeadow Country Club to connect with a new pipeline proposed by the Columbia Gas Company running into Springfield. As a retired dentist, retired college instructor in anatomy and physiology, and a retired AP biology and chemistry teacher, I'm concerned about the health and safety risks of gas metering stations in residential areas. The proposed metering station would be located in a residential area within blocks of Wolf Swamp Elementary School. Metering stations release methane and other pollutants. Methane can transform into formaldehyde, which irritates the respiratory tract and has been linked to many forms of leukemia. Nitrous oxides and sulfur dioxide have been associated with lung distress. Volatile organic compounds act as toxins to the brain, liver, reproductive systems, and to fetal development. Particulate matter has been associated with brain lesions, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. Metering stations also release these pollutants in concentrated forms through blowdowns, releasing gas through the blowdown valve, creating a 30 to 60 meter high gas plume, either by routine maintenance or accidentally. These may have more severe health implications than long-term low levels of exposure. In August of 2018, Matthew Beaton, the Massachusetts Environmental Secretary, ruled that environmental impact reports must be prepared for the pipeline project containing information about the health and safety risks of the project. In an earlier filing from Tennessee Gas, they did not explain why alternatives to the project, including the creation of higher efficiency levels for the current infrastructure, were not considered and in fact were rejected by the gas company. Tennessee Gas has argued that the Longmeadow metering station does not meet the threshold for an state environmental review. According to the state certificate, Tennessee Gas must consider the Longmeadow metering station in its pipeline analysis. In 2014, a proposed pipeline project by Tennessee Gas to bring fracked gas into New England was halted due to pressure from environmental groups and public officials. The state certificate requires that a draft report for the pipeline project must be filed, and this opens the window for public participation and input from state agencies. Tennessee Gas had asked for permission to skip this draft report requirement. According to an article in USA Today, April 10, 2015, by at least one measure, Tennessee Gas has the worst safety record for its type of business, having reported more significant incidents to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration over the last decade than any other such entity. As of today, 91 municipal boards of health, including the Longmeadow Board of Health, have sent letters to the governor expressing their concerns about the health and safety risks of natural gas and gas infrastructures. We are all painfully aware of the gas explosion that occurred in the Merrimack Valley last September. It seems that the work orders given by Columbia Gas to its employees were at fault, leading to this disaster. Longmeadow has had a firm commitment to reduce our carbon footprint through recycling and through the single-use plastic bag ban. Given the track record of the two gas companies, the reluctance of Tennessee Gas to conduct environmental studies, and the environmental secretary's concerns about the project, I respectfully ask that you use your offices to investigate the need for the project, the safety and health risks of the project, and the impact of this project to all of us living in Longmeadow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other citizens' comments or residents' comments at this time? No. Seeing none, are there any select board comments? Tom?
So this past weekend, we went to the Mass Municipal Association Conference in Boston, and, they had a series of workshops, and there were some very interesting things that we talked about. But one of the things that they brought up was the formula for school funding, Chapter 70, and they said it's really based on the 1993 reforms, and so, it's hard to believe that they haven't upped the amount of money we get, when they've increased the amount of requirements. So, there is a bill that's going to be processed, and they're asking people, actually the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, was asking for people to support this Homeless Act. I don't know how it's pronounced, but that's going to be coming up. But there was also some really interesting things, including this. I don't know if you guys saw this thing with the tax or they talked about it later after in the workshop on helping seniors stay in their living situations, and they talked about having basically a property tax deferral program where the state would allow people to not pay taxes, and I guess it would accumulate like a lien, so when the property is then sold, they would have to pay the taxes. But that would be a way they had a lot of different ideas for people to look at, shared housing and so forth. So it was good. There was even talk about using beet juice on roads as a way to reduce the amount of chemicals used for melting ice. You could reduce, one of the primary chemicals that would go on the roads. So, it was good for us to go to something like this and keep us thinking about new ideas, and the fact that all towns are sort of in the same boat as we are, trying to get by with a fairly tight budget and keep building things up. And it was encouraging to see our leaders, besides the mayor of Boston, the governor, Charlie Baker, and the assistant governor spoke, lieutenant governor, and then Senators Warren and Senators Markey. And so it gave you a good feeling that we're in good hands living in Massachusetts, and so that was pretty much it. But
Thank you. Maria, any comments? No? Okay.
Hey, Mark, I will say that,
Go, Pip.
apparently the town does offer the tax deferral program,
Mhm.
and that, if there are questions, they should contact the town assessor's office. Basically, it works, they're deferring their property taxes. Interest still accrues, but doesn't accrue as a high of a rate as if it were a delinquency. And then there is, exactly right, there's a lien against the property for when the estate is sold, the town would be the first lien holder to get its money.
It's means tested, though.
That's why I said they get a hold of the assessor's office
Yeah.
for some of them. Maybe it may not be for everyone, but it could be, certainly a means for some. some folks.
Some folks, yeah. Oh, great, thanks, Paul.
Thanks. Right, go right to the town manager's report, Stephen.
Thanks, Mark. So as you know, Elaine and I and our program coordinator, or our most recent program coordinator for the Adult Center, retired, and I think in the process of actually moving out of town. So we advertised the position as a part-time position, which it currently is, and we're unsuccessful in really attracting any good candidates. Looking ahead to when the new center is completed, which is probably less than 18 months from now, we know that we're going to we'll need somebody full-time in that position to get the full benefits of the new center. And so we're going to move forward with making that position full-time today. And I think that I lay out here briefly that the benefits of doing that will, first of all, help us attract better candidates. Offering a full-time position, I think it'll be a more interesting job to folks out there who have, great program coordinating experience and may bring a lot of talent to the center. And I think it also will help have that position be able to plan a transition into the new center, both from a programmatic standpoint, but also from, right now, Parks and Rec is really responsible for booking the current center, Greenwood, but we think that a new program coordinator should really do that for the new adult center. So it may be a little soon to do this, but we were just, in planning ahead, we knew we were going to need to make a move like this, and rather than bring on somebody part-time and then look at either having to terminate that position and then create a new position down the line, we thought, for the budget impact is minimal. Most of the salary is picked up. Most of the additional salary cost is picked up by a grant. And so we're going to have we're going to advertise for a full-time program coordinator. So I'm just advise the board of that.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So we started the revolving fund. Is that already in place? So as the programs start collecting money, it will go into the revolving fund?
Yes.
Okay, so that will help fund the position also.
Yeah,
Thank
I don't
you.
know what we're at in terms of collections, but I'm sure at the end of the fiscal year, we'll have a report on the first full year of our revolving fund, but I think collections are going pretty well.
I honestly haven't looked at it in a while. So
I did ask Jim that, I think in November or December, and he said that they were seeing steady, collections from the program, from the revolving fund. You're right, I think, so you're right, that there is a revenue opportunity associated with that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So just a quick update on the DPW project. They have been working on transporting soils. That actually I can't even believe I have good news to report on this, but last week it went much faster than they had projected. And I think if you go out there and look, the pile is much smaller, and I think it's been going pretty well. They were moving soil even today, which I was pleased to see. So hopefully we'll get back into building our new facility. Two quick announcements on things that we're doing. There's a municipal vulnerability workshop that's going to be basically a key stakeholders meeting for town department heads by and large. But I know this was an area of interest for the board, so I want to let them know that we are moving forward with that, and there is a stakeholders meeting. John Dearborn lays out more detail in the memo in the packet. If you have any questions, you can let me know.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
That's not the public forum one. So this is first to stakeholders, and then later in the spring we'll have a public forum. Is that the way it works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not in here because I just found out about it today, but tomorrow at 3:30, there is a conference call with the governor about the Chapter 70 discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, so and I talked to MMA legislative staff about that while we were in Boston as well, and I actually was pitching our idea for a legislative relief for our tax ceiling, and when we were discussing it, this school funding formula thing came up as an idea where there could be a possible avenue. But it's a little soon to promise anything, but at least, obviously if it's in a larger bill and the MMA supports it, that obviously makes our effort a lot easier. There's actually two. There's a conference call Wednesday and there's a conference call Friday afternoon. I'll be on the one tomorrow afternoon, and Paul will cover the one on Friday afternoon, because I'll be at a meeting off campus. And then just a few quick updates on the ongoing projects. So the Bliss Park Article 97, I know Town Council has been working on both that and the operating agreement. We lost some time at the end of last year with the work that was needed for the special town meeting, so we will be having them redouble their efforts on those projects here in January and February. Speaking of the Energy Committee, they did the one project that was shovel ready that was funded by Columbia Gas was the fire department. That was completed. Fire chief looked around, said the work seemed good. I don't know if we'll have data to show any savings in the near term, but they did get it done. Unfortunately, because of when we found out about the availability of the funding, they were not able to get contractors for any of the other jobs. We're in contract negotiations, or not contract, it's not really negotiations, really just figuring out terms and conditions for the streetlight audit agreement with Real Term. I expect to have that done this week. They have it, they're marking it up. I did see our representative for Real Term at the conference as well. And
I
he
spoke
said,
to him also. He said February, the first week in February,
Yeah.
they've got people scheduled to be here,
Yeah. So
sign the contract before then.
Yeah, well, I need to get it back from him, but like I said, once we get that going, we'll be linking back up with AGOM with Springfield and potentially Springfield.
On that, I have a question on that. So you said you'll reapply for Green Communities grant for more money for the streetlights?
Yes.
Okay.
Although I will tell you that I was always under the impression that you have to have your money expended before you can apply for a new grant, and so I thought it was expended by the March deadline, and it's February 1st. So, and I've tried to negotiate that, and I get the answer I got was no, you have to spend it by February 1st. I think that'll be a challenge to meet the next cycle. So, we'll have
Is
to
there
see if we
nothing
get-
else to spend it on?
Well, it's
Can we shift it to something else that we're spending that's
no, not at this point.
energy efficient?
Not at this point. Like I said, I thought that when they said that there's a deadline in March, but it's a month sooner than advertised.
Okay.
I talked to Jim Berry at the MMA.
Yeah,
He
and do we have
confirmed.
another option for October funding? Does it come twice a year now? Because I always thought it was the end of October was the funding grants.
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I know the folks were here to talk about the meter station. I still haven't heard anything or seen anything in writing from FERC or DPU or anything on that, so I don't have an update on that.
Yeah, I got an email from the, Longmeadow Biplane Awareness Group, and they had all sorts of diagrams showing the structures, the proposed structures. I don't know did you guys get that?
Yeah, we got they
Yeah.
got them from the same place we got them.
And, yeah, but you haven't gotten them?
I'll be candid. Until I receive it from Kinder Morgan,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
then I'm not sure what I'm really looking at. And
Okay.
I know,
Yeah.
and I'm fairly confident, last time I spoke with Kinder Morgan, they had not done any design work yet.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I
spoken as a true administrator.
right.
Good idea.
I just go
No,
with
you're
what's
right.
I just go with
Yeah.
what the official record is.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My understanding is, and I got communication on that, and I thought it came from you, that the EIR came out, and we have until February 9th to comment, with the 30 days to start clicking. And I did talk to I talked to Morgan Hess, Murphy Hess? Murphy Hess, and I said, what is our ability to, should we be bringing in an energy and utility attorney? Are there things that we can do input in? And they said yes. Comments at this point in time are really important, and in order to reserve your rights down the line. And so I have some names for you, but if you could look into that further, because the clock's ticking if we have until February 9th to make a response on the draft EIR. So that's my concern, and yeah, I don't think a lot of that stuff came from Kinder Morgan or Columbia Gas. I think it was the EIR draft that we were seeing in our emails. Thanks.
Stephen, I understand that, you know, we'd asked, find out from our attorneys what our opportunities were, what our capabilities were in acting on this, and, you know, I mean, just in your report here, we got 4 things that we're asking the attorneys to do, but given the fact that there's this February 9th deadline, we ought to talk to them about moving up so we get a pretty quick response on what we need to do, so we can do it if we need to. We still have a select board meeting the first week in February, and we can take action at that point and submit something prior to February 9th, but it'd be a real shame for them to, on February 10th, to tell us, here's what your rights were, instead of, here's what your rights are. And I know that, you know, we've got them doing a lot of things, everything from our library issue to the, you know, to some of the other things that we're working on with Bliss Park, but this is really a time-sensitive issue,
Okay.
so I don't know if you want to give Mike a call or whatever, but see if we can't get something in time for the next
Yeah,
town meeting, the
and
select board meeting.
I would encourage working with a energy utility who's actually made comments on EIRs before or worked on whether it's which side of the aisle, because I think it's an important time for, and we don't have much time to get the attorney to start reading up on energy utility law and EIRs. So unless he's got someone in the firm that does that, maybe we need to cast our nets. Thanks.
All right, I'll check it out. And then, in light of the conversation we've had about assessments and tax bills going out, I did a second installment of Chairs and Chairs with with Carolyn Reed from the Board of Assessors. She did an excellent job explaining in easily understood terms what the process is for valuation and tax rate setting and abatements and everything else. So, if you have insomnia, go ahead and check it out.
What time is it on?
It's on YouTube. Actually, you can watch it anytime on YouTube. I don't know when LCTV runs it.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully not often.
It probably was on the other side of the championship football game.
Probably,
Sure.
yeah.
So, Stephen, I had 2 comments about, not your report per se, but the submitted reports from department heads.
Mhm.
The first one was actually for Paul, and that is noting the resignation of our assistant town accountant, Chris Caputo. And so I guess I'm just asking about not just hiring a replacement clearly, but, you know, the need for some kind of succession planning, and it was interesting because some of that was mentioned at some of these workshops over the weekend too, about, you know, getting people into municipal government kind of work, and so I don't know where that stands, but I assume.
Way ahead of you.
Go for it.
We're going to post we looked at Paul and I discussed that a week or 2 ago, and said same thing. It's, you know, we are hiring all the time, and so we know where we get good results from hiring process and where we don't, and what attracts candidates and what doesn't. And the position has really become primarily almost integral in preparing the CAFR, the GFOA budget. There is accounting work to be sure, but in many ways we looked at it as, is this an assistant finance director? Which could work at the direction both the finance director as well as the town accountant. And so we didn't really have a need to change the grade of the position, and made only relatively minor adjustments to the job description, but that captures this, and so we basically just changed the title. And then the intent is to get a pool of applicants who could potentially, I mean, there's really no replacing Paul Pasterzik, but someone who could just come close.
How long had Mr. Caputo been here?
I think 3 years.
3 years?
Over 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
And I guess, I mean, again, when a candidate comes in, they'd have minimally a 2-year shadowing period to, you know, be invited to all these beautiful meetings I get to go to.
We did talk to Paul talked to current members of the team, and the people that are in leadership roles within the finance department were happy in their roles, and so we'll be looking outside for
Right.
or we're going to try to look, we're going to look outside and hopefully get someone who can, lead us through a succession in a few years.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. The other quick comment I had was about a note in Chief Stankwitz's report that they've now implemented text to 911 in Longmeadow, which follows an implementation of cell phones ringing here as well. And I guess I'm a little bit, miffed, I don't know what the right word is, that, because I thought we had been told that our current systems would not allow either cell phone capture or text to 911, which was one of the drivers behind getting to a regional dispatch system. So I guess the question is, what's changed? And it's great that we can do it and we can do it now, but, does that mean we don't need to make these multi-$100,000 investments in systems to accept these things, which was the reason we were going to regional dispatch? One of the reasons we were going to.
It was a reason. That's what we were told by the state at the time we started planning this, to be honest with you. And as you know, there's no local, decision making on it. I think it's a software upgrade is what they do. They go to their existing computer technology and upgrade the software to be able to do this. I was as surprised to find out about it on the news as anybody was. There are going to need to be capital upgrades to our emergency communication system. If we're not in a regional dispatch, the state isn't going to pay for that. There are also 75% of our operating costs will be underwritten by the state because we'll be a regional dispatch. And there are many operational considerations that were really the primary drivers of creating and joining the district and moving forward with the regional dispatch. I think the fact that we have the ability now to do local cell calls and text to emergency calls is great, but that may also increase the demands on dispatchers, which can be better absorbed as a part of a district. I mean, to have, and the way we're looking at it is, if we go over a certain point of calls or texts or emergency alerts from the community, do we have to add another full-time dispatcher so we have two on, every day at once, versus having 5 people in a shared dispatch room where they can all kind of handle influxes of calls. That's the model that we're going with. So it's a point well taken, but they were really minor. And actually, I thought it was a much bigger deal. When we talked about this 3 or 4 years ago, it seemed like text to 911 was going to be this big deal, and now they just rolled it out. Didn't tell us anything about it.
Yeah, I guess, Stephen, my disappointment is really with a consultant that we hired who wrote the report and said, you can't do it without this. And
that was the truth at the time.
I understand that, but if the consultant can't see beyond 18 months, into what, and recognizing telecom technologies are moving pretty rapidly, that was the basis for my concern. I understand where we're going and what the other benefits are, but and it's great that we have it, but it's very unusual that we were point blank told we would never be able to do it in our antiquated systems, and here we are doing it.
I have no idea why, but I'm glad it's there too, but I can't tell you why.
Right.
That's why we're still on that topic. Because in the report, it said that the fire department had 2,557 calls last year, which is almost 400 more calls than the year before. And with texting, it might be interesting to see how much it goes up, next year, between this year and next year. But part of it is because our population is aging, and so there's more need for services like that.
Yeah, I think, Tom, it's important to point out that everything I've read and heard and been told is that although we can't accept text to 911, people are saying if you have an option call, there's far more information. Text is still a little bit generic. Text should be reserved for times when you literally can't make a phone call. You can only, you believe that it'd be more dangerous to call than it is to text, but the systems aren't as robust with text as what we're being told. So, so I think it's important that people here don't just say, well, I might as well text them. If you can get a lot more information across verbally. Okay, thanks. Any other questions for the town manager, Marie?
On that MVP workshop invitation, we need a select board representative. So you'll have to decide who you're going to appoint to send to that.
Who are you saying that to, Mark or me?
Mark?
Oh, okay.
As
The
chair.
MVP workshop needs a select board representative?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't note that. Were you interested in attending?
Yes, but I'll have to figure out if I'm going to be the energy representative. So if I can get maybe someone else like Dave to be
The
the
energy.
energy,
Okay.
then I could do that, but I'd have to see what I can pull off.
Well,
of the
let me
committee.
know if you can't.
Yeah,
then
okay.
We'll make alternate plans, okay?
Mark,
Yeah.
I did have a couple of things. And I guess the other thing was that when we talked about the vulnerability plan, now, one of the things that I think we're very vulnerable to would be like a plane crash at some point. And do they drill for that?
We did-
Because
we
there's
did a,
planes constantly going over.
We
Yeah.
we did desktop training 2 years ago.
Plane.
Yeah, on a plane crash.
Okay.
A-
Great.
And under the exercise, it crashed like literally on top of my house.
Oh, right.
And the trainer, I think
Yeah.
he was a state trooper, he had no idea. We're looking at Crestview,
Yeah.
Crestview Circle and the thing, and I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, we do have, we did a training for that, but I mean, whether it's a plane crash or a train derailment or what have you, the elements of what you do there are a lot of carryovers.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But yeah, we have done one of those.
Okay, great. The other thing is I noticed that the Moms Club had a fund, they raised some money through a road race, and they raised almost $5,000 for the library, and so I'd like to just thank them for all their hard work. That's a great thing to do. And again, Robert Stocks, I noticed that also graduating from the FBI Academy. That's really an asset to our community, and of course, Robert did a lot of the work for the police department on accreditation, which is a lot of making sure policies and procedures, so he's a pretty hardworking guy. We're lucky to have him. The other thing is, when I was reading about the Board of Health, they talked about, different services that are available, and, we may get a chance to talk about more tonight, but, I think there should be some sort of a way to coordinate, like, all the services immediately available in our community, all the medical services available, and all the mental health services available in our community. So, because I'm sure there are people who aren't even aware of the emergency center that's in the shops. I mean, and so at some point, as we make this transition into a regional health department, health board, maybe we should look at that possibility to make it easy for people to know exactly what's here in close proximity. Of course, that will change when the new buildings open up at the end of Dwight Road. But other than that, it was a nice report. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? So I was going to move on to old business and just ask for a motion to approve the minutes of December 28th special town meeting, which closed and approved the warrant.
So moved. Oh,
That's all right. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Lucusa and seconded by Ms. Angelides. So any comments or questions? Pretty quick notes. All those in favor? Any opposed? There's one abstention, so the vote is 2-0-1. I was not there, so abstain. And then a motion to approve the minutes of the January 7th, 2019 regular scheduled meeting.
so moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments, questions? All those in favor? Vote is 3-0 to approve the minutes of the January 7th meeting. Next item on our agenda was going to be a review of the capital of the Charter Review Committee's capital planning section. Richard Foster had prepared something for it. He's very much under the weather, and so I'd like to, with your permission, defer that till Richard gets back here and can lead that discussion. So we'll move right to new business. And the first item of new business is shared health program. So I'll call Beverly Hirschhorn, who's our health director up, and with Stephen Crane and Beverly, this is probably the earliest you've ever been called.
I just want to say that Mary Pat Toy, who is a member of the Board of Health, was supposed to join us tonight. I've just texted her something. She may have had an emergency at work and not been able to show, but she was the designated person who was supposed to join me as a representative of the Board of Health tonight.
Okay, thank you. So, just as a background for everybody, there's been discussions ongoing led by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to discuss potential for shared health programming between Longmeadow and East Longmeadow, and actually a preliminary report, or I don't know if it's formally, I guess it's the draft report, has been issued to us. And so tonight we were just going to discuss that just in general. And so Beverly, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, as you know, there have been a couple of things that have been happening over simultaneously. One is that you've had me as your health director for a very long time, and I sort of led the department from the point of time where the Board of Health split off from the Board of Selectmen, and there was it really became a town department. And I've sort of gone that far in my role as sort of a one person does all in terms of administration and inspectional services for the Board of Health. But that may not be the way that it always has to be in the future. And I brought it to Steve's attention that it is very likely that I might retire within the next couple of years, and that you might want to do some planning or some research at this point in time to decide whether you want to go the way of a single agent, single town health department, or whether you wanted to explore a different way of delivering services. At the same time, there's been the governor has convened a special commission on public health, and this among the things that this special commission has been looking into is the idea of regionalization or sharing of public health services. So it's sort of these two things are sort of converging together. And so we've been looking into this, and we've had, fortunately had the town managers of both towns. We've had the health directors of both towns, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and a representative from the Mass Department of Public Health who's been able to sit in on the sessions of the working group. And we've come up with, the broad outlines of a plan. I'm not sure this will be exactly how it may turn out, but both boards of health, meaning the Board of Health of Longmeadow and the Board of Health of East Longmeadow, met a little bit after Thanksgiving and were presented with the plan. And to my knowledge, both boards of health have endorsed the draft as it was written, and I think the working group is ready to go on to apply for an additional state grant to really look into implementation, which would involve doing a community health assessment of both towns to make sure that the ideas that we have line up with the needs of the community. We identify various health parameters and whether we're on the same page with those health parameters to know that we have that our draft includes proper staffing for a future shared health department. And also we need to have a intermunicipal agreement drafted, and which would, and this grant might pay for some of the services of Pioneer Valley Planning to help us with those expenses. So we've come up with some general broad outlines, which definitely could be tweaked or even amended. but we need to go a little bit further before we have a intermunicipal plan. And then we're hoping, before I leave, which I don't believe, well, I guess it really depends on my health, but assuming I have good health and good cheer, I don't think that would be before the beginning of FY 2021, so about a year and a half from now. And we're hoping that we'll be able to get an agreement in place and perhaps have some opportunity for overlap of personnel so that anyone who comes into work in this town knows the licensees, knows what's expected of them, has an idea of how they're going to be working with other town departments. It'll also give me an opportunity to collate all the local regulations, policies, interpretations, just general procedures that I've had in place for over 25 years and put them in some kind of a collection so that we'd have an idea of how things did operate in this town, or how the Board of Health has run in this town, what local initiatives we do have, and then give this over to the new shared public health service department, and see whether at some time in the future they want to amend these, or whether they'll live with them for quite a while until they want to go forward with some other plan of action. So that's where we are.
So if I could just build on Beverly's point, I want to reinforce the idea that this is not, that we're, like I said, Beverly's timeline is a large influencer in our timeline, but I think it's, like you said, if everything goes according to Hoyle, we'll be able to time this up well in terms of implementation. But one of the things the working group has done is evaluated two distinct options for doing this. One is through a district, and one is through an intermunicipal agreement. And in talking that out, we decided that the working group felt that the intermunicipal agreement was the better pathway forward to get this started, because it's kind of easy in, easy out if it doesn't work. So both East Longmeadow and Longmeadow agreed that the first with an intermunicipal agreement between the two communities. The report should have been in the packet again, but I'd given it out, I think, last fall. And it talks about basically increasing the hours of, we have a public health nurse, they do not. They have a health inspector. We don't have a health inspector. And so by merging the two, we both get increased services. I think it'll probably, from a budgetary standpoint, we may save a little money, but I think it's more regionalizing and getting efficiencies. In the short term may save us some, but I think in the future it will have potential to avoid cost escalations. I think the big thing is, and I know Beverly's very modest about this, but there aren't many people who can do the public policy side of the job that she does so well, which is a crucially important role, and a role that both the Board of Health in Longmeadow and the Board of Health in East Longmeadow will continue to retain. But she also does inspections, so testing pool water, going and checking the hot water temperatures in restaurants and refrigeration temperatures in restaurants, and Longmeadow Day, she makes sure that the food trucks and the other food service areas are serving safely. She does inspections at like JGS and things like that for all kinds of stuff.
Camps.
And reviewing files for
Title
camps.
V, it can go on and on.
And we haven't even mentioned the plastic bag enforcement. That will be her responsibility as well. So the big thing is there are parts of that requires knowledge of public policy, public health policy, as well as our community. And we think that knowledge can be developed by a shared health director. But then there are parts of the job that simply require you to be able to read a thermometer. Now, we want that part of the job to use the same level of due diligence that Beverly has always used. But it is, the standard for water temperatures and things like that are either federal or state promulgated regulations.
Mostly. We have a few little local regulations that are more stringent, but in general.
It's federal or state.
Right.
And so anyone can, not anyone, but it's the same evaluation in Longmeadow as is in East Longmeadow. So there are parts of this that we think some synergies can be created, which is why I think the boards of health have both endorsed the concept. So where we're hoping to go, quite frankly, is to kind of have a discussion. I have any questions, but I'd ask the board to endorse the draft report, basically endorse the concept as we move forward with grant writing and kind of building this up. Because I think the next stage, if we do get the grant and we keep moving forward over the coming months, we will be getting into drafting an intermunicipal agreement and a transition plan.
I just want to add 2 points. The merging of public health services between the two towns is definitely more efficient. It will allow us to get, with the finances the way they're structured, it will allow us to get certified and licensed personnel, which is a must. But also, it will, by having a larger population base, it may put us into a position where we would be eligible for certain state grants. And most state grants today have a certain population, a minimum population size for the service area, and they're generally over 25,000. So this may allow us to get some state grants that we are now not eligible for.
So just one last point before we get to, so I just was double checking the budget numbers. From a budgetary standpoint, we would basically, based on the current projection, probably save $20,000 a year based on what we spend today and the projections of the shared intermunicipal agreement model. That's not, the budget right now is $145,000 in personnel costs. Then we have a bunch of expense line items that we may achieve some efficiencies as well, but we're going to get increased services. Even if the money was the same, we'd be getting more for that money. But I do think that there will be some savings to be achieved as this develops. But I want to make sure that I kind of undersold that. But I think the big thing is more resources for the same or even less money.
Okay, Tom? You have a question?
Yeah, so this community health assessment, can you tell me a little more about that? How are they?
Okay, well, we need to make sure that various health parameters, such as, infectious diseases, various chronic diseases, to make sure that the prevalence is fairly close between the two communities of various health parameters, so that we understand that we're planning and we're putting our resources and our plans for programming in the appropriate, we're putting our bucks where they should go. If we find that East Longmeadow has a particular kind of a problem area and Longmeadow has a different type of a problem area, then at this point at this time, we want to make sure that we're going to either be putting the resources of one of the personnel in this shared department to address the particular health problem that we identified. So far we haven't, in the published data that we have been privy to, we haven't really seen too many differences between the two communities. But if we look a little bit further into it, we might find out about it, and it's better to find out about these things at this point in time to make sure that we have the proper staffing and that we're going to direct the staffing to focus on certain subject matter areas. And the other thing is that community health assessments are required for, as the initial step for accreditation of any health department. that's the direction that public health is going to in Massachusetts, as it is for police departments and many other municipal departments. So if we can get a state grant that will pay for this community health assessment, it will put us, one step down the road without Longmeadow and East Longmeadow paying for it. So, but, accreditation is one thing, but I also think we should know what problems, if there are any problems that either community has that we need to have our staff focus in on.
So it would be like if they uncovered that there's like a Love Canal section of Longmeadow, and there's a lot of people.
It could be, but I think it may have to
that-
do with various health problems that we haven't seen in the readily available published data that we've already documented in our draft plan.
Because is there any other way that we get this information? Because doctors wouldn't need to report it, I mean.
It would only, well, that's the thing.
schools would be
We're
the
very
only
good
one.
at getting reportable diseases.
Yeah.
But we need to be able to go back to the hospitals and especially who do have some of this data and have them cull it out for us by our zip codes.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to be looking at problems, elderly being readmitted to the hospitals. Other things that the hospitals may be able to get out of their data, and primarily Mercy and Bay State are the hospitals that serve this community.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily pull this data out for Longmeadow and East Longmeadow. We have a lot of generalized data for the county, but it's very much skewed by socioeconomic factors. So we want to get some more data directly on the 01106
Okay.
zip codes and the 01028.
And that would all be, people's identities is all protected?
Right,
'cause
no,
it's all
it's numeric, it's just a
just data
statistical
on who,
data.
the number
It's
of
not
people with certain conditions.
conditions.
Okay, that sounds great. And then, like what I talked about earlier, you have assessment of needs, and then you look at resources. And does the health department care at all about what resources are in the community for helping people?
I
mean,
think
is that-
that our nurse knows what resources we have in this community. She's in fact, there are quite a number of people that come in to see Carol Steiner, who is our public health nurse, and are looking for all sorts of referrals, whether it be to assisted living, nursing homes, all different kinds of referrals. And she has, over the years, collected quite a bit of data about resources that are available in this general greater Springfield area. And we want to make sure that that information is carried over to, if we now have a full-time nurse, that we have data for both the Longmeadow and the East Longmeadow area available to the public health nurse.
And is that something we could put on a website?
I'm sure, I don't know. It would depend on what you would like to see on the website. She and our outreach coordinator for the Council of Aging have a wealth of information that I don't believe is well enough publicized. That really is available for not only seniors, but especially adults in the community. I think that we really should, I think we could handle this by press releases or letting people know that we do have resources in the community if people have personal health questions or health questions regarding their elderly parents for referrals. So I think we could handle that by press releases and also something on each of the two departmental websites that these are services that we offer without giving a listing of particular places, because the institutions come and go. And perhaps, I hate to say this, but sometimes information is brought to light that we may not want to refer to different establishments over time, if there's been some problems in those particular
Right,
institutions.
yeah, that's true.
So I
Yeah.
think we'd want to advertise that we have that available for folks, and we'd be happy to schedule appointments. And I know Carol even would be happy to schedule off-hour appointments if necessary, to talk to families if they need assistance in referrals.
Yeah, because that would be, I mean, I guess that would be an advantage of having a larger unit like this, is that you could announce if there's a diabetes clinic, in East Longmeadow, so people would then take advantage of those kinds of services more readily.
And I think the community health assessment
Yeah,
is going to really identify what those needs really are, so we can even do what you're saying, but then even make sure our programming is tailored to where the needs are.
yeah. And just one more question, because, I feel mental health shouldn't be left behind.
Absolutely.
And would this assessment also look at mental health situations as well as physical health?
We're going to ask to get some behavioral health information, as much as we can get out of the various institutions.
Yeah, I think
we'd
that
like
would
to
be a
get.
harder one to dig out, actually.
There might be in-hospital hospitalizations at Bay
hospitalizations,
State
yeah.
Medical's in-hospital psychiatric service.
Mm-hmm.
I know personally that, because I've had to speak to patients
Mhm.
in that department, that we certainly have Longmeadow residents who have made use of that part of Bay State Medical
Right.
Center.
And another sad reality is a lot of people with mental health problems end up going to the county jail. And so, I don't know how but if you look at people with addictions, and that might be another way to analyze, to get that data also, because it's not just criminal activity. There's a lot of people with mental health problems who end up in those settings also. And I do know they reside in East Longmeadow and Longmeadow also.
We do have some of the fire department data on number of hospital runs that are related to opioid use, and we unfortunately have had a few deaths, and we've had deaths in both communities. But the numbers are small. What we don't have, and what nobody can really get their hands on, are people affected by this problem. That did not require ambulance service, that did not require, that we don't have death certificates on. That's the hardest group to quantify, is people who have not accessed our emergency medical system.
Okay, I'd like to
Thank
just
you.
move on a little bit. Marie, you had a quick question?
Couple of questions. One is the assessment really doesn't get into anything other than your data's coming from the hospital, so we're not really hearing about the mental health issues, whether it's DV or even gambling that's occurring, so we can measure them for a later possible reimbursement for effects.
I know, all
So
we
this
do
is
have
all just
statewide
hospital.
data.
Have we ever looked at sending out surveys or anything else to see
There will be surveys done as part of this
Will the
process.
surveys also include gambling issues? Because that will be important if we need to measure to show any changes and effects on our community if we're going to be able to go after MGM money.
You have
think
to
it's a
remember.
separate
It's a
pot
whole
of
separate
money,
fund.
right.
But we need to start measuring if we're going to know. And if they're doing the health assessment now, it might be a good time to do the measurement.
Our biggest problem is, whom are we going to survey, and who's going to ask?
Right,
Are we going to get good information out of this survey? And are we going to survey a random sample of people at the senior center? How are we going to get a random sample of adults in our community, except through a voter list?
I think there are ways that people will advise you on how to best get a good survey measurement out of
Right.
community. My other question, though, was are we increasing our full-time benefited positions with this, that Longmeadow will be responsible for?
We haven't worked that out. That's part of the IMA process.
So we're still on figuring out that part of the process. There
We're
was,
also figuring out whether these people are going to be Longmeadow or East Longmeadow
Right.
employees.
and who decides the fee structure? That's going to be decided
Part of
down the line, too?
Intermunicipal agreement.
Okay.
Beverly,
I think Longmeadow will still set Longmeadow's fees, and East Longmeadow will still set East Longmeadow's fees.
Oh, we
Unless you
will.
guys want to do that, unless the two towns want to do it jointly for continuity purposes.
Well, they mentioned this, something about this administrator benefit. The administrator's not considered part of this whole cost, and so will he be deciding this larger figure, what the fees are, or it could be split? I don't know, it mentioned administrator is not included in the list of.
Was that on the district model or on the intermunicipal agreement model?
It was just the one of, which one that was? I thought it was intermissible agreement one. I'll look that up and get back to you on it.
That's fine.
I
It's
don't
going to
think
be
there was
digging
any-
through.
I don't think we've gotten to the issue of annual permit fees or other
Okay.
fees that were assessed, but you have already set our fees, and East Longmeadow has a different set of fees, so that's something to be explored in the future.
Okay.
Beverly, I have a couple of questions to give me a better understanding of the relationship between our Board of Health and our Department of Health. Because I think it's important as we move toward potentially an intermunicipal agreement, it helps me better understand
Okay.
the local impact, influence, local control that we still have. And I guess I haven't spent any time personally on looking at that relationship. All I look at is like the Parks and Rec Board versus the Parks Department. And so how does the Board of Health work relative to the Health Department in Longmeadow? And, what are the roles of those two groups?
I see the Board of Health primarily as a policy-setting role, so they will I report to them my activities, and then they will direct me where to place my emphasis for anything that is not a mandated activity. So inspectional services, the number of times a year I may inspect a type of facility, what type of inspections, those are set by state law. But they will direct me for anything that is not mandatory, where to place my energies. They also vote on new regulations. If there is an issue where there is a circumstance that is not spelled out completely in the regulation, and there might be some discretion, and which might result possibly in a lawsuit, I will ask their input as to how to go forward in an enforcement action. When there's this gray area, and I'm concerned that I shouldn't be making this decision unilaterally, and it's a policy. There's questions of policy. The Board of Health will definitely get involved in that situation. Then certain orders that I set, such as an order of condemnation or an order to vacate a home, those all have to be voted on by the Board of Health. And also they are responsible for directing me to initiate the drafting of any new town-specific regulation. And they give me input on amending that regulation to fit how they want it to read. And then I prepare for them a final document for their review and approval.
So they have statutory obligations then, is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, they do.
Okay, which may be different from the Parks and Recreation
Very,
Commission.
very different. They also, to be honest, if I were to be out of town on vacation and the nurse is unavailable or does not know how to do something,
they can step in?
One of the members of the Board of Health would have to step in my place and actually perform the required services. Or they would have to be responsible to, in a sense, cede their authority and have someone from one of the appropriate division of the Mass Department of Public Health to come in and take care of the issue.
Okay, well, that helps explain it. The other question I had was something that I noted a difference, for example, in spraying for mosquitoes. I think East Longmeadow has in the past, I don't know whether it's Zika or whatever airborne, mosquito-borne disease there have been, and we generally haven't. Is that based on the Board of Health's directive, or is that based on the professional, the health commissioner's directive
Both.
generally?
I have to say that behind the scenes, I'm in day-to-day contact. Really, several times a week, I'm in contact with the Board of Health chair. I'm also in contact, because of the open meeting law, I might ask a question to one or more of the members of the Board of Health where they have specific expertise in a certain subject matter. But I have brought the issue of spraying to the Board of Health, and we have reviewed the state guidelines for arbovirus control, and the state does not recommend. It is not the State Department of Public Health's recommendation that there be routine spraying for what I would call nuisance-type mosquitoes. Mosquitoes that generally are not going to cause disease. Then the state also has a master plan for the new types of mosquito-borne viruses such as Zika and West Nile. And there are the recommendations of how to control those potential threats are very clearly found in the state guidelines, so that if you have just a few cases, then you do a lot of public information. Then if you start to have a bigger problem, you do some larviciding of the storm drains. But there's definitely a state protocol. Apparently, East Longmeadow, their Board of Health has made the policy decision that they would like to see spraying for nuisance-type mosquitoes.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning whether we should do it or not. I guess I'm trying to get a sense, Beverly, of, if you have one director and two boards of health,
Well,
can we continue to have two different kinds of policies?
I think
Or is it the
so.
director who's setting it,
No.
and we end up kind of falling? That's the thought process I'm going
I think
through.
that we have, in our current thinking, we will retain two separate boards of health. And to be very honest, each Board of Health may go off in a totally different direction if it's a local issue.
So Stephen, the question then becomes, how does one director of the Department of Health serve two, or how do they do it well, I guess? And it's a rhetorical question at this point, but I think it's something to be considered, because I think both communities probably like that autonomy of having a Board of Health setting policies, as you said, and yet if you have one person who's implementing it, we've got to get the right person who understands that you may end up doing different things in these different communities in response to what might be thought of as there's West Nile virus
Can I
been
just-
found.
If I just may say that this is not a unique phenomenon. There are several communities that have decided that they like to share public health services.
There are 16 districts in the state.
In fact, I just spoke to the health director who heads the Melrose Wakefield shared public service, which is close to what we're considering. And yes, she does have the charge of implementing the wishes of two separate boards of health, each of which may have very different ideas about the same issue. But you do need to have someone who is experienced not only with with the interpersonal aspect of dealing with two different groups of people, but also has the subject matter knowledge to, at least if she feels that there is a technical problem with the way perhaps one of the boards of health is approaching an issue, to educate that board of health and see if they'd like to change their plan regarding a particular problem or issue. So it's not an easy task, but it's being done every day in Massachusetts by some very able-bodied health directors.
Stephen, my personal opinion is it might be helpful for us to hear from some of these people who have gone through it, just to find out what I think we'll hear a lot of the strengths, but what some of the watch-outs are, because if we can benefit from their experiences and not have to, reinvent the wheel on resolving the issues that they ran into early, I think it would be real helpful, and maybe that would be something the PVPC could put together as part of this for us.
I guess I would say that experience it has influenced the report that you have, because not only did PVPC have some experience with this, but one of our, as we noted, someone who works for the Mass Department of Public Health, specifically on
Local issues.
on local issues and regionalization, was at most of our meetings and had a lot of input on a lot of the recommendations and things like that you see in here were influenced by her guidance on that exact subject. I mean, I'm happy to look and see who's around who can talk to us, but
Well, I'm thinking in terms of when the intermunicipal agreement comes before this board, that it include, resolution to issues that maybe earlier agreements
Yeah.
didn't understand were going to be issues, so that it's addressed in the intermunicipal agreement. And I see this idea of having one person have two boards of
Two
health and
masters.
theoretically two town managers, based on the structure here, is a challenge for anybody to
No.
go through.
On the draft we received on page 32, there shows a diagram. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
saw
saw
that.
it.
And it shows an advisory group.
that's
No,
the
that's a different
region.
model.
that's option
That's a
one.
different
That's a
model.
different
Oh,
model.
that's a
I
different
think
model. That's
we've,
the first one.
I don't believe that the working group, and I know the boards of health
I saw
do
it.
not endorse
Yeah,
that
you can
So it's
particular
page
model.
34.
Yes,
Right,
there
that's,
is.
that is two town managers and two boards of health.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, we got a ways to go on this before it's fully developed. So I mean, I appreciate point. These are the exact same conversations we have. I mean, I think because, like I said, because a lot of this stuff is regulated above the municipalities, it won't be as big. The number of things that could be in conflict between the two towns or the two boards of health really isn't all that many. And I think that what I predict is going to be Longmeadow is going to learn things from East Longmeadow and maybe make adjustments, and East Longmeadow is going to learn things from Longmeadow and make adjustments, especially since Longmeadow has a very experienced, long-serving Board of Health, not just only in terms of the individual members, but also the fact that there has been a Board of Health here for so long. East Longmeadow's Board of Health is brand new. And so I think there's going to be a lot of learning between the two towns. And like I said, the thing about the intermunicipal agreement is it's easy in, easy out. If we don't like how it's going, we have an opt-out.
You do it for a year and you undo it after.
Yeah, or with 6 6 months' notice, you can get out and go hire your own board of health director. And I mean those are the types of things we talk about. But and that is going to be one of the priorities in the agreement, is making sure that those conflicts that there are clear, consistent ways of dealing with those conflicts.
I think that's why I initiated this conversation so far in advance of actually, when I was considering retiring, given that there might be a lot of reluctance of a new concept, and it's going to take a while for people to see the positive and negative aspects of this kind of an arrangement. But, this really wasn't, I think we're thinking about possible implementation, full implementation to be delayed a year and a half or more. So this will give us a lot of time to get some of your questions answered, Mark.
Okay.
I don't think this is we're not planning this for
No,
July
and I
1st.
I understand that. I
this year.
just see this different from a building inspector who's working all under the same building codes, for example, where you know, a Board of Health has these local, you know, local decisions as unique as spray or don't spray. And I'm sure there's dozens like that, you know, which may be a response to the same input, but it's part of the community, and I think
East
that's...
Longmeadow spent $40,000 testing mosquitoes last year. We spent zero. That should tell you, right?
Well,
But Mark, just, and I don't want to belabor the conversation, quite honestly, but our building inspector does inspections in East Longmeadow, and their building inspector does
right,
inspections
because it's so interchangeable, it's the same...
Right, but there are some, you know, unique things, but
Right.
people just work it out. They figure it out. they
Right,
work it
and I
out.
get that, but it's different from somebody setting policy. All I'm
Yeah.
saying is, you know, it'd be interesting to find out what the watch-outs were, what were the tripping points, and, you know, what would they do differently now if they were starting over as
I'm
the...
collecting a list as
Well,
we speak. Every
Love to
time I
have
can
you share
buttonhole,
those with us.
every time I can buttonhole somebody I know that's has gone through this process, I sort of glean a list of positive and negatives, and to make sure that these are addressed when we start looking at some kind of an intermunicipal agreement.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? At this point, you know, it was mostly an initial discussion. We don't have a full board here, but I presume we're going to continue with this discussion and move this draft toward a more final,
Do you need a motion?
to do
Well, it's
what?
just just endorse the draft. I mean, the
a
report says
working
draft just because it hasn't really been endorsed by the town council and board of selectmen. It's probably not going to change. We're going to move from here into the next phase, which is working on the IMA and the community health assessment, and potentially looking at, if we get the grant, maybe looking at hiring, I think, an additional health inspector.
Yeah.
So we just don't want to go through all of that if there's not support for the concept.
I just as soon tell you, I think there's support for moving forward, but at this point, we did not put on the agenda that it was going to be a vote, Marie, so I'd be
Oh, okay.
kind of reluctant to take a...
I guess I would just say that it's been on the agenda twice now. I think we've had a discussion about it twice, and really what I'm looking is like a sense of the Congress type resolution, Mark. You're not making a public policy statement. We just want to be able to document for each town and for the people who are going to be looking at the grants with, that there is local buy-in and we're moving forward. That's all.
Did you say you needed the vote because you were going to hire,
No, we're going to pursue funding.
pursue funding?
And
Okay.
the funders want to see some level of local buy-in. And if we can say that the draft report was endorsed by the board, it just helps helps us move forward.
I move to accept
Sure.
the draft
Shared health report.
shared health report.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I believe this motion may be out of order, but I'm going to let it go forward because it's not on the agenda as a vote. We specifically didn't put it on the agenda as a vote, and, you know, and in fact, unless the vote is 3-0, we could get outvoted with new people, but I'm going to let the vote move forward. So the motion's made and seconded to accept this draft report.
Yeah, just discussion. I
Yeah.
think, I agree with Stephen, that's been on a couple times. It is on our agenda to discuss this tonight, and so I know coming here, there would be a possibility of a vote, so I have no problem voting on this.
Okay. Any other comments?
Nope.
All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? The vote is 3-0. Beverly, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks, Beverly.
thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah, I'm
you
sorry, Mary Pat wasn't able
Yeah,
to be
that's-
here. But I do want you to know that the Board of Health has just endorsed the draft. I think they have as many reservations as you may have. But they understand that this is sort of the way public health is moving in Massachusetts. And they'd like to see more specifics. Right now, we have a concept. We don't have any ideas or really plans that cannot be changed at this point in time.
Lots of questions we need to move forward to get the answers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Beverly.
Thanks for coming in.
The next item on our agenda is a discussion with the Community Preservation. We've asked Steve Weiss, who's the Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, to come up and talk to us, Steve. I appreciate your patience in being here. I'll just start out by saying that at the last meeting, there was I think it was the last meeting, there was a brief discussion about a project. It was the docks on the river that the community preservation identified weren't going to go forward and just were going to cancel. And I at the time asked Paul Sturzik if there was any further action needed by the town to, if you will, unapprove the money that they have approved. So Paul, maybe you can just, you sent it to us like, by email, but maybe you can just let people know what you heard.
Issue of the dock, putting in the dock and whatever that you folks had voted to, I think the wording was abandon the project, and Mark had asked.
Well, it was actually the applicant who abandoned it because it just
Right.
turned out to be way more
You're
red
dealing with
tape.
the Army Corps of
Right.
Engineers.
Army
and
Corps of
you're-
Engineers,
Right.
the Department of
DEP.
Environmental Protection, the Interior Department, and maybe a couple others too. It was, had he known then what he knew now, he never would have applied in the first place.
So the question amounted to, does it take legislative action, or I should say an act of the town legislative board, the town meeting, to close that or to reuse it, or can the town accountant through the year-end closing process close out that account? And as it turns out, we can close out that account without going back to town meeting, or we can also recommend to reuse that in another fashion also. But we did not have to go back to town meeting to close it out.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. There was an application a number of years ago by the town to do, I think it was windows at Center School, back when Mike Rabel was the DPW chair. And we had approved, I think, $200,000 or something like that. And when the bids finally came in, it turned out to be something in excess of $750,000. And he just withdrew that in the money. And there was no action at town meeting that I recall. It was just
Right.
withdrawn and the money put back into the
Exactly.
CPC funds.
Yeah, nevertheless, Paul, I plan on at least informing the community of what that, whether it's through the minutes of your meetings that's posted, or posting on the community preservation page on the website. Just let people know that, not that people are beating down our door where the docks, but I think they ought to know that it's not going to
I
happen.
think we discussed it and accepted the withdrawal of the application.
Okay, so-
When it's hopefully one of our
It's in the
Meeting,
minutes,
yeah.
mid-minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's where we saw it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the major topic though today and the reason I asked you to come here was Wolf Swamp Fields. When, initially there were some requests to do, there was the ring road at Wolf Swamp Field, and then there were a couple other things to redo the fields. And then more recently, about a month ago, the town manager and the DPW and the Parks and Rec Department and DPW presented to us a master plan for redoing Wolf Swamp Fields, which was at the time, under, I think, 4 phases, Stephen, if I'm correct, and
I think at least.
and over multiple years, because after you seed a field, you can't use it, so they weren't going to do it all, and that kind of thing. And the issue then became, how do we best pay for that? And I at the time, it was suggested that the town be asked to bond it through a debt exclusion bond, but nevertheless, it goes on your taxes. It just doesn't count against Prop 2.5. Excuse me. Alternatively, we found out that there have been instances, not in Longmeadow, but in other places in the state, where the Community Preservation Committee has recommended and bonded against future community preservation funds. And so I think that was those two options. One is to add to the tax bill, which is bonded through tax revenue through a debt exclusion. The other is, not add to your tax bill, but rather appropriately or reduce available CPA funds in certain number of future years while this bond is being paid off. And I just wanted to get your sense, if you could, the sense of your committee on those two options for this project.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And I'll try to give the best sense I can, but ultimately, while we've had a discussion on the issue, we've had several discussions on the issue, we have not made a decision either on a policy basis generally or on anything dealing with the fields specifically for bonding. In fact, there's actually no request for bonding that's before us, at least right now in this season. Under the Community Preservation Act, we can bond for certain things. It's my understanding, although I can't say that I've done any sort of real survey of this, that it's usually used in a situation for acquisition of property. When a piece of property may come up for conservation land or open space or historic preservation, that the cost of that is just far more than is available in CPA funds. That's what it's usually used for. But as part of this discussion, when I heard that this was starting to come up, I asked Paul Pasturzik to come to our last meeting, which was January 9th, and he was really invaluable. He gave us the numbers that helped inform the decision. In terms of background, we have I was looking at the numbers for this year. We have, I think, 12 projects, 12 applications, excuse me. The total amount of those applications is just north of $1 million, give or take. They range from $5,000 from the from the Historical Society for the Stores House to $300,000 for the Wolf Swamp Fields, which is in addition to the $250,000 that we approved for 2 applications last year. And the fields would be a total of $1.5 million or more, as best we can tell. Paul was able to give us some information about what it would cost if we were to bond, and he gave us the numbers. And at $1 million bonding and repayable over 10 years, it would cost a little north of $130,000 per year to pay off the principal and interest, plus various. I forget what the fees were called, Paul, but
The issuance costs and things like that.
the issuance costs. At $1.5 million, that would mean it's about $200,000 a year to pay off that bond. We only get around $400,000 a year, all in. 70% of that to the undesignated fund, and then 10% to each of the 3 other funds. So a $200,000 bonding obligation would really restrict a lot of what we could do over the next few years. In terms of observations, I'm going to make. I can speak personally, and I think, and some of the committee members say this. Again, we haven't taken a vote on any of this. In my own mind, one of the great benefits of the Community Preservation Act is that it allows for funding for applications and for projects that would never get on a general town budget. Things in our town that quintessential applications, the applications to restore the headstones in the cemetery over the years. There's been, I think, 4 applications to do that. That is, the character of that area of the cemetery is really part of the town, and yet that's not town land, so that couldn't be on the town budget. Applications to restore the Stores House come into that category because that's not owned by the town, and they're putting dugouts at the Turner Field baseball fields. And so, at least that's a very personal view. And again, I think there were some real concerns by the committee about bonding, partly because it restricts what we can do now, but also partly because it would tie the hands of the next iterations of this committee for the next 10 years. And 10 years or 8 years from now, there's likely to be an entire turnover of who the membership of the committee is. There's likely to be an entire new group of applications and interests in the town. And yet this bonding would be something of a legacy cost that would restrict the next generation of CPA applications. And there was some sense, some shared more or less than others, that the town, a project like the fields, and one of the great things that's happened in all of this, when we were looking at this last year, maybe the year before, it looked like the restoration or the improvement of the Wolf Swamp Fields was going to be something that would get funded over a lot of time, 7, 8, 9 years, and that's not an efficient way to do things. It has come up on the town radar screen because of the applications that have come in from the town and from other individuals. But if it's something that is really going to benefit the entire town, then it may be something that's more appropriate for the entire town to share the burden. Again, that's something, I'm not saying right or wrong, those are some of the observations or the reservations, I guess, that some members of the committee had about trying to use that, effectively take 50% of our available funds every year and bond it for a particular project.
Okay. Marie?
The park is what percentage of the money that you can use for parkland and recreation?
Well, there's 70% is undesignated.
Yeah.
Then there's 10% for historic preservation, 10% for community housing, and 10% for open space and recreation.
So it would be the 10% or the undesignated?
Well,
You'd be
the majority
actually
of it would
dumping
have
both of it together?
The majority of it would have to be the undesignated. Right now, our undesignated, our open space and recreation fund, if you give me just a moment, because we have those numbers.
I was gonna
somewhere, but
say
I
it
think
might
it's
be
about
more than
it's
10
about
years.
$45,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
It's really not very much. That fund gets exhausted every year.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it would be coming out of the undesignated fund.
Okay, so it would wipe out your park money for many years and then would be pulling out of the designated?
That's correct,
Mm-hmm.
effectively, and in some sense, whether you pull it out of pocket A or pocket B,
Mm-hmm.
it's pulling it out of the available funds that are there.
Thanks.
Well, I just wondered about user fees. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, they have these big tournaments and so forth. And are there any fees that are collected, and could those fees be used for payments?
They would be collected through the Parks and Rec revolving fund, but I don't think they have, they would have to establish something annually to pay for that type of $140,000, $130,000, and they certainly do not raise that amount in maintenance fees. Everything is more or less geared towards the program.
Just to probably
Yeah.
cut the grass probably costs what they get. in user fees.
Exactly, there's very little in
Yeah.
maintenance fees, but it would have to go through the revolving fund, the Parks and Rec revolving fund.
And we did ask that question, and one of our members is on Park and Recreation Board. They do have some money, they do collect it for fees, but it wouldn't be available for anything that the CPC might bond for. So it would, and they've got other uses for the money. I mean, one of the questions that we routinely ask is, are there monies available from capital planning, or are there monies available from, there were a lot of questions about whether Park and Rec should be paying for some of this, and do they have the money to do it, under what circumstances?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on this, Steve, are that, we're under a lot of response pressure, comments from the citizens that our taxes are going way up, taxes are going up. And to say, yeah, but we're going to ask you to approve $1.5 million for grass and leveling the fields. And you can say all you want to about the importance of sports, the youth sports programs in this community. We're still 35% of the towns of the houses in this community have kids in schools, and 65% don't. And yet we're asking everybody to pay the taxes to do this. And so, from my perspective, something that's a supplemental taxing for this, it may very well be a tough sell, and recognizing it needs to do. What I was hoping to do is find some kind of everybody kick in a little bit, whether it's CPA put in a little bit of money and capital put in for a little bit from capital planning, and maybe we take money out of the Parks and Rec revolving fund or whatever it is, but we come up with something creative, so we're not going out to the citizens and asking them to vote to raise their taxes so we can make Wolf Swamp Fields look good. And I know that's a real simplification of a lot of people in sports teams coming back and saying, yeah, but it's important, but they need to be in my shoes and listen to when the tax bills went out in December, we got a lot of notices from people saying, and those weren't supplements. So I guess to some degree I'm saying, I'm concerned that at a town meeting, this could actually pass as an override or, debt exclusion bond, when in fact, if we need it, and there's probably no doubt based on the conditions of those fields that we ought to do that we can't find some better way to do it. And the problem is, I don't know whose responsibility is to lead that consortium, but I suspect it's you're a component of it, and maybe, Stephen,
Well, I'd
we
like
are
to-
the leaders of that
Well,
consortium.
actually, I'd like to, at the risk of sounding like a little bit of an egotist, I'd like to take a little bit of credit for anticipating that. When the applications came into us last year, there was an application by the town for the ring road and for parking, and there was an application by a private individual for the fields.
Right.
And we actually had everybody, both applicants come to the same meeting. Steve was there and Mario Mazza, and we said, and we partially funded both. And the message we gave to them is, look, we can't do this out of our funding in 1 year, and we need you to, since we need you two the town and this individual to collaborate if this is going to work, because we can't fund it every year. It's going to take some sort of master plan. We requested that too. And we put in $250,000. I don't want to say as seed money, but as a start. And we said, look, we can't fund the whole thing, at least not in this decade, in the next decade. And then it's got to come from other places. And then, for better or worse, the whole issue of the fields has come up on the radar screen, much higher on the radar screen for the town. And that's why I know when the bonding possibility came to the fore, because bonding for it and paying for it all at once and getting it done all at once is obviously way more efficient, both financially and logistically, than doing it over 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that that's the case. I think my only issue and concern is a supplemental tax, which is what a debt exclusion bonding process would be, saying we're going to take your tax base and we're going to add on to it this increment that's for, as opposed to saying within your current tax bill, within your current fees that are paid, within whatever it is, we're going to try to find a way to fund the renovation of these fields. And again, we've got capital funding, we've got community preservation funding, we've got parks and recreation fee fund. There's lots of sources of money. This isn't an inexpensive project. I get it. I just find it very difficult to go to the people who say my taxes are too high and say, I hear you, but we want to raise them even higher because we want to redo Wolf Swamp Fields. Given the fact that we have a lot of priorities in town for taxes, where does this fit? And this has nothing to do with our tax ceiling. This is strictly a tax discussion.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's going to be tough for us to, personally, I think there's going to be a strong component of the community, the sports programs that'll support this, but there's going to be the same people who are screaming my taxes are too high are going to be telling us not for the fields. Tom?
This is really a question for Stephen. Are there towns that have like a trust fund where they do fundraising and just for specifically like for fields or anything like that?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that the town, I think we discovered the town couldn't really be in the business of doing fundraising.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Like,
Just
there are
one
sports.
example, I think, for the booster club for the football team,
Yeah.
I think did some fundraising for the artificial turf or something at the high school, or some
Practice
component of
field.
what was there, because, for instance, CPA funds can't be used for artificial turf. Why? Because the statute says it can't. But,
that's
but
interesting.
I know when the track and the football field was done, the booster club did put in some money. That's the only example I can think of. That wasn't a town entity that was raising the funds. That was a sports association.
Yeah.
So I guess, Mark, to your point, is the concern that, the bill's got to get paid one way or the other, and the overall amount of the bill is going to be the same, whether we bond it through CPA or we do it through a debt exclusion.
The overall,
The project cost is
the
going to be the same.
project cost is going to be the same, correct.
Right.
But
And tax dollars are going to pay the entire amount of the project cost.
it's either the existing tax base or the existing plus a supplement. That's the question.
Right.
The supplement being a debt exclusion
Right.
request.
I guess what I'd say, though, is if CPA decides that they want to bond, town meeting voters get to vote on that. If you do it as a debt exclusion, all voters get to go vote on that.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a component of community decision-making. To your point, not everybody's going to want this. But I can easily see a scenario where if CPA puts it on as a warrant article to finance it over a term, like you just said, there'll be enough people interested in getting it done that it'll pass the town meeting.
Well, what I thought I heard Steve say is that, it's his personal opinion, and he thinks that there's going to be a lot of people on his committee who really aren't going to want to bind the next 10 future committees to a considerable chunk. And so my response is, we ought to put together a consortium and say some will come out of CPA because, you've already demonstrated that you've done a little bit, you might, do more. Some might come out of capital, or that we just say, as a town, we're going to take so much less out of, 0.2% or 0.3% less capital for 10 years, because that's how we financed the public safety complex, is we took a hit on their capital to do that. And maybe we say, and we're going to ask sports and sports programs to kick that in, whether it's through the Revolving Fund or through a surcharge on sports programs that use that, or whatever it is. And Paul's going to put together this magic that says we need $118,000 a year, and somehow we're going to come up with $118,000 a year for 10 years or whatever it is. And that, so Steve, and then you can go back to the community and say, yes, it's the same project cost, but there's no incremental tax to do that, because what we're doing is saying this is a priority for the community, and so therefore, because it's a priority of the community, we're going to do this before we put in 2 more guardrails from capital planning, before we put in something else from CPA, and before we do something else from Parks and Rec. So, because it's a community priority. And if it's not a community priority enough to do those, then why are we saying it's enough of a priority to go out and do supplemental funding? And I'm not proposing that it will be, but I think that from my perspective, I'd love to offer that alternative to the community that says we can do this without supplemental taxation. Right.
I think what it was clear that we can't do it without supplemental taxation, or else it's going to be over 3 years, because it's not a town-wide priority. And the CPC has already kicked in $250,000. They might kick in a little bit more, but if they really want this huge project done within the next year or two, it's got to be done.
Okay, so I
That's
guess
my
I
view.
wasn't clear, Marie, because what I'm suggesting is that we do it within the next 3 years. We do bond it, but that the bonding money comes from existing.
Our cap
What?
goes under our cap, or existing operational budget that we're going to hit the ceiling on, and we have all these other major
Because we
priorities.
decided, yes, exactly, because we decided this is a priority for the town, and therefore, as I said, from CPA, it becomes a priority for $80,000 a year or $40,000 a year, or whatever the CPA decides, and for capital planning, it becomes a priority for a certain amount of money a year. Again, if it's important, is it more important than, I just used guardrails because that's what came to mind, but there's going to be some capital project that would get displaced from this every year for 10 years.
I think we have to hear from the people, and that's what a ballot initiative would do. And if you just say town meeting, then you're squeezing the budget for maybe how many people in town meeting? I think it should go to the ballot.
And I don't have a problem with that, Marie, but I think our history is we present them one option instead of multiple options. And I know if the option is, we're going to bond it through debt exclusion or not, that's a binary yes, no. But I'd love to see people, maybe you do this through our budget form. Do you do it, bond it yes, no through a debt exclusion? Do you bond it through multiple sources, or do you find some other way to do that?
Well, that's
But I think we
participatory budgeting, which I've always think is great, but we don't have the process in place to be able to do something like that, which
But that's not
give people
necessarily
options.
Participatory budgeting, it's participatory paying for a major capital project. And a major capital project that on paper, less than half the residents of the town are going to use.
Maybe there'll be 2 ballot initiatives. One, we're bonding it. The other is, we want it to be paid for out of the operational budget, and this is what we're cutting. So you could have 2 votes on the ballot, but I don't think people are up for that level of decision-making.
I guess
Don't undersell the people in town. I think they know exactly what they want to spend.
the second ballot initiative you described doesn't work
Yeah.
because the budget's already long done by the time you get to the
Well, it'd
election.
have to be put off a whole year.
Right.
Yeah, it would have to be put off a whole year, and that we'd have to find it within the operational budget. But that would be a no vote. A no vote would also say, you
Right.
got to find it within
Yeah,
the operational
if the
budget.
debt exclusion vote failed, then we would have to go back to the drawing board like you suggested, Mark. I mean, and the thing is, the board has already voted to make the support of the project conditioned on the debt exclusion. So the board already made a public policy statement saying, we intend to put this on as a debt exclusion vote.
But that was before I even knew that there were options such as
Right.
CPA bonding.
You can undo the vote. You can undo the vote. I'm just saying, we were, as far as the community is
Right now, you had a
concerned.
directive.
Right now, there's a directive, and so
I
I
get it.
think we can look at the other ways of doing it, and see if we can call, I don't know.
I
Paul
mean,
and I
the
can talk
question
about
for
it.
me is this a priority for the town? That's the fundamental question. Is it a priority? If it's a priority, that means you want to do this more than you want to do something else. And so then we ought to be able to pay for it within our current budget more than we want to pay for something else. And if it's, well, we want it all and we're willing to pay for it all, that's a different decision. That's the debt exclusion override.
So I guess the way I would look at it is, is it a priority for the town? Is it a priority for the town budget is really what we're trying to say.
Correct.
And I think it's an important project, but not at the expense of water main upgrades, or that's not a good example because they're enterprise funds, or
Implementation.
Use
resurfacing.
guardrails or street paving. or something.
Whatever the thing is. So,
Paid trash pickup.
right. So, what the
Yeah,
exclusion
all-
gets you, which is, and it's still a relatively small amount of money on people's taxes on top of what we're already doing. It gives the people, through the vote,
Yeah.
the opportunity to decide if it is a priority for the whole town versus just town meeting voters deciding it's a priority for the town. And I'm not trying to say the legislative branch does make those decisions, but if your point is we need to really reach a broader audience to assess how much of it, because the people who want it are going to make it the priority at town meeting. I think we've seen that many times.
Right.
So then, and I give you the senior center as a good example. I don't think, the senior community and others, not just seniors, but the community said, we want a senior center. And the board decided that you were gonna put it forward on the warrant, and let the voters decide. I don't think anybody had any doubt it was gonna get through town meeting, because the seniors were committed to going to town meeting and making sure it got to the ballot. And then it passed healthy, almost overwhelming at the ballot, and I'm sure some people voted for it that weren't only seniors. I'm sure some non-seniors voted yes for that as an investment in the community. I see this in principle as the same way, but obviously a much smaller impact. And so I truthfully, I think we can look at doing it either way, but it's, if the community just wants to go ahead and put on that extra assessment to not displace other functions that under our operating budget, which we're already trying to hit at, we're already trying to hit that at a 2% instead of a 2.5%. Give them the option.
And that's fine, Stephen. I'm not, the logical conclusion would be more and more things are gonna end up being taken to the general public as, do you wanna pay for this? And we're gonna do it through debt exclusion. I mean, it could be that, our supplemental road contribution that we've been putting $400,000 additional money from capital. We can cut the budget by $400,000 tomorrow if we can pass a $400,000 a year, override. And we can bond it and raise $4 million. We do a lot of streets. I'm not, again, I don't know where the idea of using supplemental budget appropriations is sound financing and where it's not sound financing. Maybe we test the waters and see.
Or participate budget and say, do we want to bond $1 million for Wolf Swamp? Do we want to bond $1 million towards OPEB? Or do you want to bond $1 million towards more road work. I mean, this is like the first step, I think, in an interesting way of having more dialogue with the residents on how they want to spend the
You may
money.
be right, Marie, but I got to tell you, I mean, I'm sure you got the same emails I got and comments from public that we got
No.
when the tax bills came out.
Oh, and the tax bills come out. I thought you
Yeah, I
meant
mean,
about this
it-
project.
Everybody did. The tax
Yeah.
taxes
Right,
went up.
but I think, Mark, let me just say this, and this is something, I've been doing this a long time, and I've heard many people from many different locations and many different walks of life complain about their taxes. Nevertheless, people show up to town meeting every year to spend money in this community. And I think, there's the big reason why taxes went up on many people so high is because their properties appreciated in value. And one of the reasons people's property appreciated in value is because home sales were stronger in the year before, in whatever price range their house is in.
Front page of today's newspaper. That was the headlines in this morning's newspaper.
Right. So, as a result, the investments that have been made in this community and maintain the quality of life probably directly impacted the value of their house. The operating budget, as you recall, went up less than 2.5%. And then we had the DPW project that debt exclusion vote, which hit people's tax bills for the first time, which was approved by debt exclusion. And so I guess I am sympathetic to folks who may be having a hard time paying their tax bills. I truly am. But it's kind of almost like a throwaway comment in many ways when people say my taxes are too high. Well, did you go to the last town meeting? No, I don't have time for that. Well, that's where those decisions get made. And so I don't let that stuff bother me as much, because I know how focused we are on making sure that we assess the least amount we can while maintaining that quality of life, and we get the most out of every dollar we tax people. But people are always going to are going to complain their taxes are too high, and and honestly, FYI, they're going to go up every single year. That's just the way it's just the way it works.
Yeah, okay. All right. Marie, last
Well, I
word.
think you heard us and what you'd be able to put towards the project, but I think it is a tough ask you to tie your hands for 10 years
Well-
on the whole project.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I want to clarify to Mark and everybody, I haven't counted votes on anything. We haven't taken votes. There's been a lot of very thoughtful and very thoughtful discussion about it. In fact, Paul was there last week, a couple of weeks ago. He can probably confirm that there were a lot of questions, a lot of concerns about it, but no decisions have been made. The only other thing I'd point out is that we can only deal with the applications that are in front of us right now, and that season, we're in the middle, almost at the end of the season. We're planning on hopefully having a meeting next week at which we're going to vote on the projects that are before us. Our window or our portfolio is a lot smaller than yours, and I do it, and I'm not unmindful of that, and I'm very happy with our limited portfolio.
But I think his point is we did not apply for CPA money for Wolf Swamp Fields because the decision to pursue an exclusion vote was already made.
I hear you.
So,
And yet, at the same time, there are 3 applications from the town for a total of about $350,000. Yeah, using without, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but if $200,000 a year is being allocated over the next 10 years for the fields or anything else, that reduces what's available for, and those are for playgrounds, and those are for the store, for the store's library roof, things like that.
I hear. I was chair of the capital planning committee, and for 7 of the 8 years I was there, we had, I think, a third of what we should have had because 2/3 of it was paying off the public, public safety complex. And so I understand tying the hands of future boards and how terrible that is to do. I hear where you're going. We just have a few more minutes that I want to dedicate to the CPA discussion. Is there anything more about this year's CPA process that you thought might be important to share with us, whether it's projects that you're looking at or things that you want to appeal to people at home to help you out with?
I don't know that I want to lobby for lobby on air. I will say that we have our under the bylaw, we're required to have our public hearing once a year. That that public hearing is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Council on Aging meeting room, and people are welcome to attend and either ask questions or make comments for or against. And you know, I guess I would also say, just to add, we do talk about collaboration. I make a point every year of reaching out to Dr. Metz on the capital planning, and just to see if there's something on their radar screen that we ought to know about. In prior years, Mario Mazza's predecessor used to put in applications with capital planning and with the CPC. So we coordinated, and we've. It's my understanding that Mario does not do that anymore. So we do try to coordinate and make sure that we're not a little island all to ourselves.
Thank you. Anybody else have any last questions
No?
for Mr. Weiss?
Thanks for coming in.
Steve,
My
thanks
pleasure.
so much. I appreciate you coming in very much so.
My pleasure.
The next item on our agenda is a comment or discussion on the MGM annual payment. So Stephen, you want to direct this.
So,
You might let people, remind people at home about the
Yeah.
amount, the timing, all that.
So, under our surrounding community agreement with MGM, we received an $850,000 upfront payment to make improvements to intersections that were referenced in the traffic study, that's the Converse, we call it the Converse L project, because it is Laurel and Converse and Longmeadow Street, and then Forest Glen and Longmeadow Street. Those intersections, and as you know, we're pushing those towards the tip because the cost of the project exceeds even the annual amounts. So the other funding stream from our surrounding community agreement is the guaranteed minimum annual payments, and within 90 days of the opening date, we are to receive $275,000, which we have received, and then each year there's a 2.5% increase in that amount. This DOR directs that the towns treat it as estimated receipts,
Yes.
which basically makes it cash
Universal for anything.
for anything. However, under our surrounding community agreement, it says which payments are acknowledged to be reimbursement of expenses for the community's participation in the look-back studies as described herein, for the community to monitor traffic conditions on its roadways, for the community to monitor public safety conditions, and for the community to mitigate significant and adverse impacts within the community, consisting of projected traffic and roadway infrastructure impacts and public safety personnel and response cost impacts. So, under this agreement, it really falls into broadly public works or public safety categories. Our first payment, we have carried and pursuant to the budget, the approved FY 2019 budget that was approved, we knew we were going to be getting a payment in the budget year, and that is carried in debt service because we had to put it someplace. So, and right now we have that money being earmarked, if you will, on debt service for the new ambulance that we purchased. But we want some direction going forward, looking at the preparation of the FY20 budget, as to what areas the board would like to see the funds allocated. We can continue with debt service until and identify projects specifically related to areas of need identified in those studies that we did. My recommendation is, even though we're supposed to be getting this money for 15 years, we should focus on using it on one-time or long-term expenditures, because it is annually recurring one-time money is the way I look at it. So I would recommend against using it to offset personnel costs, because once we stop getting this money, those personnel costs are still going to be there, and we won't have a way to pay it. So things like infrastructure upgrades, intersection improvements, purchasing of large equipment, even if it's, I don't think police cruisers are a great use, again, because you're gonna have to pay for them eventually once you start getting this money. But in the ambulance we just bought, will probably come close to outliving this agreement. but we just want to get some guidance from you all where you think it should go.
Stephen, can I just ask a question about, one-time use funds? But isn't that fungible with recurring funds? Excuse me. So, for example, one could say, well, we could use it for capital improvements.
Sure.
Okay, but if we do that, then unless it's supplemental capital improvements, let's say we're going to use this to reduce our capital contribution elsewhere by $275,000 or two, then when this money goes away, we're going to have to increase that capital investment, right?
Yes, yes. But
I mean, it's not as critical because it's not paying somebody's salary, but, it's still capital improvement.
right, I guess the way I look at it is, if you said we're going to put it into pavement preservation, and either just add it to pavement preservation or reduce our pavement preservation contribution by this amount, you're buying a 20-year life cycle at least, resurfacing as a part of it. So you're getting something that, is a long-term investment versus salaries, which are every year you have to keep paying into it.
Okay.
That's my view.
I'm just trying to get your thinking on.
Yeah, it's basically commodities versus expenses.
Okay. Marie?
I thought, and is it because we're delaying the project, that payment every year was going to help pay for the bond for the work that's going to be done on the L project?
If we
And
do
it was
the
barely going to cover it, and it was still going to cost us money out of our
It wasn't nearly going to cover
pockets.
it, is the problem. Marie.
Yeah.
It wasn't nearly going
So
to cover it.
why, so is it
Because of
because
it-
you're delaying it to go with the tip?
Yeah, if it goes on the tip, we don't have to pay a bond on it.
Well, are you decreasing the cost of that project?
Oh, we're
No,
just
the
having
state pays
pay
for it.
And that state would cover that full project that we're planning on doing,
Yeah.
including the upgrades on the crosswalks and the upgrades down in the, all right, so what other street projects relieving traffic is on the line that we could push further
Well,
on?
I don't know what our annual cost on the look-back studies are. As you know, they just opened in August.
Uh-huh.
And so what intersections are going to be impacted by this, by the casino traffic, that I don't know yet. But the biggest one, the second, aside from those intersections that we just identified, the second biggest area of impact would be Dwight Road, and we're
But-
doing those now.
But can we, if we put, in other words, we have the diff money going towards that, but if we prepay that, then all of a sudden, that diff money will start going back to our general fund.
But this money's going in the general fund is really, it really is, from an administrative standpoint, the funds just come in, they get calculated. It's really more of a, how we say how we're spending it. It all comes out on the wash at the end.
Yeah, but
in terms
then
of
we
general
could,
fund
then
revenue.
we would, but if we prepaid that and we didn't have, how many year bond is that?
No,
Which one, the diff?
The diff.
But Marie, if we use this $275,000 to pay the diff bond every year, then we're going to take $275,000 of tax revenue and put it in general fund. It doesn't matter, it's the same $275,000.
Yeah, but then you're actually spending the money on traffic issues. And then you finally have less money that your hands are tied on that
I think
money.
with the diff, you have more of a statutory responsibility than you do with the MGM money.
Oh, you
To
do?
keep that money earmarked for those
For that
projects.
project. Yeah, so, and what about the pavement? Is the L project going to include the pavement between Laurel Street and Longmeadow
As we sit here
Street?
now, I mean, yes, we're
Whatever
just
the
at 25%
tip allows
design.
it.
And maybe in that year, as we get closer to bidding that project, or as the state gets closer to bidding it, we may, I mean, on the Congress Street project, that was a tip project, but there were expenses that the town had to absorb, like doing the easements and things like that, doing all the design. There may be parts, so in that given year, we need to take that 275 and offset costs associated with the L project that are not, they call it non-participating. We may, but we don't know that today. And we'll get 2 or 3 of these payments before we will know that.
So right now, you've already decided how to spend the 275 that came in December, and you're asking for our opinion on what's going to come
That's
in
just
the
where we
upcoming
have it
budget?
slotted.
It's where we have it, we kind of earmarked to accelerate the payment on the ambulance.
And how much was the ambulance?
We had to borrow $530,000.
Even though we had the ambulance fund?
I'm sorry,
The fire truck.
the fire truck.
Oh, the
And-
fire,
and
I was wondering.
truck.
This
Yeah,
is-
It was the fire truck.
Right,
The fire truck.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
My error.
You led that.
Yeah, I know, but I thought he was talking about ambulances.
No,
and
I
I was
misspoke.
shocked by
And
the cost of
I've
the
asked an ambulance in
ambulance.
the past too. It's the fire truck.
The fire truck,
Yeah.
okay, and the fire truck does respond to 91.
Correct.
And we have seen increase in accidents on 91. Yeah,
I'm not going to
and-
get into what we've seen and not seen.
Yeah, but
I
I'm
don't really know
saying,
what's
I
attributed.
think we're
response.
following the agreement of the.
Yeah, the fire
response.
engine that
Yeah.
goes to the highway is a completely legitimate
Yeah.
use under our surrounding community agreement, which is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why when he mentioned it, I said, that makes a lot of sense.
Pavement doesn't.
We did
This
not
does.
identify,
Yeah.
we did not identify this source as a source for the debt when we approved the borrowing for the fire truck. It just so happens that when we made the budget for FY '19, we allocated it there in anticipation of that. And it's, like I said, that's an easy decision for year one, but I think we want to have more, we can just go year to year and make the decision as kind of a footnote, like when Paul does his budget things and you have sources, have it as a separate general fund source and decide how we want to spend it year to year, or we can come up with kind of a strategic plan of things we want to, do going forward. I don't think it really matters much. We just,
Right.
we just want to get some guidance as we look ahead to FY '20.
Tom,
I mean,
Tom had a question.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a very responsible way of using these funds. If we waited for tip money to do these intersections, how much of a delay would there be compared
A couple
to
years.
a couple more,
A couple of years, yeah. I think it's FY '23.
FY '23?
Yeah.
But if we use this, if we started the project when the money, now, we could just start it next year, right?
But it's not enough money to do the project, that's the
No.
problem.
I mean, it's a $5 million project
Yeah.
now.
And $5 million is,
$5 million.
And the other thing is with the tip, there's a chance you can jump if you're ready, like we were with Converse Street. We were FY '20 or '21 with Converse Street, but one of the projects wasn't ready. That's why we did the
Right.
50 for 5 town meeting, because we showed that we could get ourselves ready with the easement acquisitions quickly.
Right.
And we got that slot a couple of years ahead of where we were supposed to be. And the feedback we get is that we could have the opportunity for this as well, which is why we're pushing ahead with design.
Okay, sounds good, so we could get bumped up ahead.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Are we at
Thank you.
75% yet, design?
25% design.
25, but we
Because
have to
then you have
get,
a public hearing at 25% design.
okay, but we got to get to 75 to make the tip.
Right, but you have to have your public hearing at 25%.
Okay, so do you think we'll be able to have it for tip next year?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It honestly, it all depends on what else is on the list.
So when are we having the public hearing if we're at 25?
I don't know.
But it should be sometime in the next few months?
I thought, yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure.
It's really, that's Mass DOT does all that.
Oh, Mass DOT does the public hearing. You don't set it up. Okay.
So, Stephen, what I'm hearing here is that nobody's objecting to the current use for
Yeah.
for paying off the fire truck bond, and
No.
right now, it's, let's look next year and see if we've got another bond payment, or if we want to put it in the streets next year, as opposed to setting a policy for the next 13 or 14 years.
I just want to put it on the radar screen.
Okay.
Because it's the first time we've really talked about it in a while.
I mean,
And, but as we move forward with the town manager's budget, I think I'm hearing the feedback, we'll figure something out, we'll just identify what we have it, and I use the word earmark, it really just does come in as general fund revenue like property taxes, so it's like saying, I want the $9,000 you collected on my house and property taxes to be earmarked for, whatever, it's kind of like that.
Right.
But I think for, I don't want to say transparency, but certainly reporting purposes, like when the gaming commission comes and says, what'd you use the money on? We want to make sure we have a clear and consistent story. And so we want to keep this money identified as here's where it's going, so the gaming commission and the community know that we're not using it on salaries and frittering it away on things that we're not going to get a great ROI on.
so should we schedule a vote on this at our next meeting to vote to put this toward the fire truck?
I think let us come up with something, and I think we put
Okay.
it in the budget message as far as where we think we're going to spend it, and that way it'll be kind of engraved at that point in time, and then it could always be changed if you folks had different ideas about it in the budget process.
That's fine. To my comments about taxes going up, I think if you put it in the budget and earmark it, it really does reduce our taxing amount by
Yeah.
the amount we need to tax people by $275,000, right?
I mean, like I said, I hate the idea of using it as a budget as like a budget filler, like a gap filler. But if we're $275,000 off with our property taxes from getting to a 2% levy increase instead of a 2.5, we're further than that right now. But if we got it that close, could we say, okay, well, we're going to take $275 out of capital, and we're going to put, or debt service or whatever it is, debt service that's funded by the general fund, and put this in there, into those accounts and say, and get us to the line, sure.
I don't think you can be, there are limitations. They were very clear in the arbitration and when it was approved that there are limitations to what we can spend it. In fact, they even said, we just don't want you to throw it towards your
No,
budget.
but I'm saying it specifically calls for roadway infrastructure. So pavement preservation, sidewalks, things like that.
It was to alleviate traffic and public safety issues that are related to the casino.
But traffic, wear and tear on roadways is a part of that.
Not sidewalks.
He didn't say sidewalk.
Yeah, you said pavement.
No, but pedestrian safety is a part of it.
Okay. Well, don't make it too much. I don't want to just stick our necks out too far
Yeah,
on this.
I mean, I don't think we want to reduce investments in capital, but I'm just saying it is flexible within the realm of public safety and public works.
Yeah.
It is flexible.
Public safety and roadways.
And I think maybe, Mark, you may be right. I think maybe now that I've said that, I was looking for more of a longer-term strategy, but I think maybe year to year, you just figure out what's the best bang for the buck in that given year.
Plus, if you then need it for supplementing something like the TIP project, you haven't said, gee, I already committed it to do such and something
Yeah,
else.
that's fine.
All
Okay.
right.
Good
Okay, let's-
feedback. Thank you.
Let's move on. The next item on our agenda was just a follow-up from the special town meeting, and I don't know, Stephen, if you want to, I can report that the following morning, the town meeting was on Thursday. Friday morning, our town clerk forwarded the motion noting that it was approved to our state representative, our state senator, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the President of the State Senate. Jackie, who else did we send it to? There were a whole bunch of emails that.
4 people.
Right, so there's those 4 people. So, it is in the
It
State
has been
House. And
filed.
Stephen, you've heard
Yeah.
today it's been filed.
It's been
so-
filed by Representative Ash and Senator Lester's lead co-sponsor. Obviously, it's the beginning of the legislative session, so there are, I think, hundreds, if not thousands, of bills that are being filed. So I don't think we'll see action on it. I don't want to speak for the legislative delegation, but I just want to, based on the feedback I have received from them, I just want to manage the community's expectations
Well, in
about
terms
the
of,
timing of
in
it.
terms of managing expectations, Marie and I guess Richard Foster, we went to a session at the Mass Municipal meeting, and a very knowledgeable attorney indicated that is also one of the potential or possible outcomes is that the legislature sends it back to be voted on at a townwide referendum. So, not saying that they're going to do that, not saying they have done it, but, or they will do it, but apparently that's a response to a charter change home rule petition, I think is the way she put that. That's a possible response. So just managing expectations, it's going to be a while, huh?
And so, Stephen, the legislators will get back to us. We'll get a letter, or we'll get some sort of a proclamation? What'll happen if it gets passed?
Well, if it gets, I'm sure they will provide updates to the town
Yeah.
if there's a hearing on it, if a vote is scheduled, or if they get the feedback that we're sending it back to the town for another vote or something. I mean, the one thing we know about our legislators is that they are responsive and they do keep in touch when things are going. My expectations management was, if we don't hear anything for a while, it's not because they're not doing something, it's just part, the legislative process kind of grinds slowly.
All right, so we'll
But I'm
hear-
sure we'll get updates as they go.
Yeah, so we'll get some sort of notice from our legislators that this bill's been passed, or this thing has been approved.
Or it's got a number, or it's got, whatever happens.
Committee.
Right.
Yeah, it's gone to a committee or something, yeah.
Yeah, and then the town is mandated to follow what was approved by the Senate and House, whatever.
That's a legal question. I don't know that I feel comfortable answering.
Oh, okay.
All right, Marie?
Right, so the docket number, if you want to follow it, is HD 3957. And Representative Ash H. Robbins said, it will be assigned a bill number when it moves to committee, which might take a week or two, because chairs haven't been assigned to the committees, and she will keep the town informed about progress. In regards to what you were talking about, what was interesting is they said it's not just the recall, that actually all these little administrative changes we're voting in on the charter might also have to go to the ballot. So we're hoping that we'll be able to still do it by home rule, but they all could get kicked back to us, which would delay everything for another year.
Yeah, one of the things that was pointed out is that when they say go to ballot, the only election that counts is the normally scheduled town election.
Yeah.
It could not be a special town election or a special election, or it could not be a November election. It must be. I mean, and this woman knew her stuff.
But I guess what we'll have to figure out more. I thought the number of people who actually attended town meeting was a relevant factor in whether or not that happens. That's
No.
what I thought you were saying.
No, she said the committee makes that decision. I mean, the legislature can just say, no, forget it, to go back to ballot. It'll come,
Oh, the legislature just gets
They
to
make the
decide
decision.
whether. Oh, okay.
yeah,
it's-
and that's why it could go either way. We'll send you her contact number, too. She was
really
brilliant.
sharp.
Who was it?
Yeah. Who was it?
Andrea Goldberg, and she's at KP Law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's good. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the annual town meeting date. We need to set the annual town meeting date, and the proposal is to, that the annual town meeting date be held on May 14th, 2019, and working back from that, it sets in place a whole bunch of different deadlines, and I just want to read this so people can hear it, and that is primarily the importance that citizens petitions would then be due at noon on Monday, February 25th. That's essentially 4 weeks from yesterday, for citizens petitions, for closing the town warrant based on a annual town meeting date of May 14th. So that's the recommendation of our town clerk, and I think, actually it's Mr. Crane's recommendation, I apologize. And so I'll accept a motion to accept the setting of the annual town meeting for May 14th, 2019.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, is there any discussion?
We all know that's really Debbie House's recommendation.
Whatever.
Well, is it?
So it's
The town clerk isn't agreed.
Right,
Everyone was
it's based on a lot of
discussing.
stuff. I mean, it's
Okay.
based on the fact that, at town meeting, there may be issues because we have a referendum allowance at town meeting, that if people don't like it, they have so much time to gather signatures to overturn a town meeting decision through a referendum, and it allows them to gather that time and still get onto a ballot for the June 11th town meeting that we set town election that we set the town election for. So, I mean, it wasn't just a date pulled out of the air. I think
Second Tuesday in May. No later than this second Tuesday in May is really, it's always the second Tuesday in May.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus we have to line up the gym and do all that other stuff.
Yeah, so, anyway, but there's, and Steve and I would ask that this letter with the article submission be posted on our website, or always is, so that citizens can see their deadline for submitting citizen petitions, should they choose to do so. So this motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? The vote is 3-0. Sets the town meeting date. Set your calendars, May 14th, 2019. Thank you. And I guess that was also the last item on our agenda, was to accept that annual town meeting article submission deadline, but that's all part of that same vote, in my opinion. So that,
Is that a committee? Scannick Valley?
go ahead. We're going to
Report?
go to committee reports. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so on January 16th, we had a meeting of the Scannick Valley Regional Health Trust. Paul Sturzik and I were there, and Arlene Miller was the chair. And it was my first meeting, and it was pretty interesting. It seems like there were a lot of payments. There were people who do the telehealth medicine had given their first payment to the trust. Optum sent in a rebate of like $5,000. There was another $20K in interest income that was talked about. And so it looks pretty good. The other thing they talked about was, well, they talked about a number of things, but something that'll be on the horizon will be the health savings account, which is a high deductible, but then people would keep the money in this health savings account and can accumulate over time. And so it gives people a good tax advantage, and we'll be talking more about that. And but you know, it doesn't come without its you know, its struggles. It's not an easy thing. So it'll be interesting to be part of that discussion.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything to add about the meeting, but
Paul, I just have a question.
Yeah.
How much were our medical insurance rates going up this year? Was I,
For FY19,
in the FY19?
they went up in aggregate because some of them went up at different rates, I think just under 7%.
Okay, I only say that because at that MIIA luncheon, they're so proud that the MIIA medical rates averaged 0.6% increase, and their dental actually went down. Although they gave a range of like, 0.2 to 3%. I mean, every, different categories went up different, but it's interesting that they seem to.
They may have had a good year. I'd challenge them on their history.
Oh, yeah, I hear you. I mean, we're still doing better than that. And their biggest thing was people came from GICC over to
Right.
the MIIA insurance. So apparently if there's a pecking order, GICC is still down at the bottom in terms of
Very well be.
performance. But anyway,
Evidently, a bunch of healthy people came over from GICC.
whatever. I mean, they're all experience-based. Fine. Are there any other committee reports, Marie?
Yes, we did not get a quorum for our tax ceiling task force.
Oh.
People did not show up at the meeting. So we had a few reports from the town manager in regards to two of the projects that we're trying to look at, and one is zoning, possible zoning changes, as well as the water tower property, and I forget what else you reported on. But we couldn't deliberate or vote on anything. We've picked the next date on that to be 4 o'clock on March 26th. In regards to the Energy Committee, we're still trying to chase down, the Attorney General's office still is not coming through on that plastic bag bylaw, which is very frustrating. I went by their table 3 times, and that person who was in charge of the municipal law was obviously hiding from us, because we're
I
also
went by
looking for our
twice and she
signs.
was there. I was talking to her.
You were.
Yeah,
Every
if I had
time
known,
went,
I
she
would have.
couldn't- So did she say anything about our sign bylaw? She's been
No.
sitting on that too for 2 years.
Some of us usually reserve those asks for things that are like really important.
Yeah, when is this bylaw coming out? We
But
need
I
to
would
know.
not put the plastic bag ban bylaw as high on the priority list or something I'd bother somebody with. But that's
Oh,
just me.
that was her job, municipal bylaws. That
So
person.
I went to the plastic bag ban,
Oh, the
Breakout
workshop?
session.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
and I actually did get some good suggestions about implementation.
Oh, good.
One of the things is getting word out to businesses.
Yes.
I made the comment, Beverly, the Board of Health Director is responsible for,
Or your designate.
or my designate. Right.
You can designate somebody else.
Beverly is obviously very busy as it is. As you know, we did join the East of the River Chamber this year, and I'm hoping to work with the chamber to find out how many of their members are Longmeadow businesses and kind of develop some methods of outreach with using the chamber as a resource. I assume we'll send out a letter to the businesses at some point in time, talking with a copy of the bylaw and explaining how enforcement's going to work and everything else.
one of the ideas the committee came up with is that every year we get, in February, a mailing comes out to every business in town. We have to do the audit of our property tax for businesses. And that's due by March 31st. So if that mailing's already going out, maybe we could tell them, please go to a link on the website to get updates on the plastic bylaw, because unfortunately, we won't have any information. That's why I was trying to get information from the Attorney General, because that mailing period is coming out. So if you could talk to the assessor, they'll tell, the assessor's
I
office,
think
they'll
that
tell
might be
you
the
that.
due date when they're coming back to us. I think the mailings probably have gone out.
Yeah.
No, I haven't gotten it yet. I'm one of the businesses, so I was watching
You
for
have
it.
over $10,000 worth of personal property?
Yeah,
Okay.
it comes out to me sometime in
Okay.
February, or
Okay.
late February sometimes, because we
It's a
have
helpful
30 days.
suggestion, but we're not bound to that, and we may find a different way to do the outreach.
Yeah, it's just a cheap way of doing it, yeah.
Okay.
And then the other thing is you asked the committee to come up with the goals for the hazardous bylaw, so we came up with goals. We brainstormed, and I just sent that out to everyone, just for an FYI, but it was mainly to go to town manager, to your bylaw task force.
The other thing,
We
Maria,
don't have
is
one anymore.
You don't have one anymore?
I think it's the select board that does that now, doesn't it?
No.
Didn't the bylaw policy change all that?
yeah.
So we're supposed to have a subcommittee putting together the hazardous bylaw?
Let me look at the
I don't think
policy.
we're going to put it together. I would also say that there was, I got an email today from a citizen, actually a member of your committee, who put together, was it the hazardous, it wasn't, it was the citing of gas systems bylaw. And I advised her that it should go before the planning board and have them be the sponsor of it if they saw it.
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
Well, there's actually a model bylaw about, and this has to do with the Tennessee gas pipeline, but, a regulation of gas distribution systems in towns, and other towns have had this, and so I think they use that as a model, and they're going to be taking it before the planning board to see if the planning board will endorse it or suggest changes or whatever, so that's also moving forward. Kind of a way of how do we control some of the infrastructure things in town through planning and bylaws. Okay. Any other comments, issues? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion passes. We're adjourning at 9:25, 9:26. Thank you very much. Our next meeting is the first Monday in February, and we will see you then. Keep warm. Good night.